Here's a project I did for Scholastic. It's a book bag. So I'm working on the raw shot as a smart object because it's entirely possible that this might be used for posters or other larger formats. So we made a mask. There's a close shadow, and this shadow is really just normal, filled with black with a mask on it. And then there's a little bit of a cast shadow. I like this because it gives me flexibility to change the shadow depending on the printing process. A 30% shadow may be absolutely too heavy, and others it'll be fine. When I worked at Time magazine, I got yelled at for making my shadow 35% opacity. The books were really just faked. They're just cut out and warped. It's just a color set to multiply. And if you wish, you can change the colors. That's great for when people change their mind and say, let's make the yellow book pink. You can just do that. I needed a strap shadow to go behind the bag because it had to fall over the books. There was a little retouching. That's where the strings were. I made a selection there just to pump up the red. And generally it's a good idea to use one mask. See, this is a group now. So that way if you need to mess with your mask, you don't have to do it through multiple masks. You can just have a master mask for a group. It's a lot easier and more efficient. And then here, this was just not quite white. You know, there's like 20% ink in there, and now there's 0% ink. And they just wanted it white. So many people use frequency separation for flesh retouching hair. It's also really good for material textures. There's your before and your after. There are many tutorials on frequency separation. I will go through the process of just showing you how I made this group for a 8-bit image. First thing I do is mask what I want to use frequency separation on. So now I made a copy, and I'm going to bring this to the top and call this low. I'm going to duplicate that and call it high. Let's just group these and call it a frequency separation, FS. Now we start with the low one, and we just want to lose the texture. Generally Gaussian blur is fine. Go to 4, 5, 6. I'll work with that. So there's your low. Here's where the calculations come in. So now you go to this layer, and you go to Image, Apply Image. You want to pick the low layer. You're going to apply the low layer, and you're going to pick RGB, and you're going to go to Subtract. Scale is 2, and the offset is 128. So it looks like a high pass layer, but it's not quite. So again, you're applying the low layer to your high layer. The blending is Subtract, the opacity is 100, scale is 2, and the offset is 128. And you hit OK. So now you have this and this. This gets set to linear light. Let's put everything back on the bottom. So what happens? Nothing happens really. You don't see any difference, which is exactly where you want to start. We're going to dupe that and set it to normal and make a clipping group. It's very important that this is linear light and this is normal. This you're going to duplicate. I don't work on this layer, and I don't work on that layer. And you'll soon see why. And I'm just going to take a lasso. That seems about right to me. It depends on the size of your image, how many pixels it serves. I'm working on the low copy. I'm just going to pick a Gaussian blur. And if you want, you can paint on this. You're working on the color layer now. Essentially what you're doing is working on color. Now if you just hit blur a couple times, now I can see in blurring the color I've brought red there where I didn't want it. So what I can do is just make a rough selection here. Copy from there, paste it there, clip it, and you see I'm back, and I've sort of absolved my own sins. And that's why we don't work on these layers. We always have them to go back to. Let's just do a little more. Again, working on color. Okay, now let's say the work you've done on the color layer looks pretty good to you. But then there are some detail things which are not color related, which need some work. Let's just say this area has been identified as something undesirable. You go to your high copy. Let's just try lassoing a piece of detail that we think might be usable. Hit Command J. When we clip it, it looks okay. Now what happens when I move that over? Now I masked it so that you can't see anything. Now I can take my brush and with a little white I can expose the areas that I want to use. And inversely, using black I can take out the areas that I don't want. And when I'm happy with this, I can apply the layer mask and merge down. And let's say you wanted maybe a little more texture down here. Command J. Move it. Right, so there's texture where there was none. But I can see there's some artifacts from the type. That's okay. I can modify that with a mask. So here I'm going to put a mask on this. Mask the group. And this is a way to put texture where there is none. It has applications in many situations, not just fabrics. Work on the mask, pick a brush. So this just kind of demonstrates some approach to frequency separation that isn't beauty or skin retouching. If you're clever with it, it can do wonders. If you overuse it, then you can make things look like you used a lot of frequency separation. That was the original shot, and that was the finished shot. Do Scholastic a favor. Buy a kid a book. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.